All right, so today we're going to talk about the SQ4R reading method. And this reading strategy is really a textbook reading comprehension strategy. So how can I understand what I'm reading in my textbook? You could also apply this to articles or any other type of course reading you have to do for your classes. But it's really to help that situation where, you read your textbook chapter, you finish it, you close the book, and you have no idea what you just read. So, what is the SQ4R? It's a reading and note-taking strategy that's going to help you get more out of the textbook chapters. It's going to help you understand the material. It's going to help you actually retain the information. And probably the best part of it all is that it's going to help you prepare for exams by basically forcing you to make study notes. This strategy or this approach to reading might take a little bit longer than if you just started at the beginning of the chapter and quickly read it, but you're going to get more from it. So the first step in the SQ4R is to survey or scan the chapter. Before reading, you're going to start at the beginning, flip through the pages, scan those headings, read them, think, do I know what this is talking about? Are these terms familiar to me, or does this seem like brand new content? Can I connect it to anything I already know, or do I think I know maybe where this is headed? I'm going to continue to scan the chapter for images, diagrams, bolded terms, things like a chapter summary or questions at the end of a chapter. And actually, my first thing I'm going to read, I'm going to start with the chapter summary or chapter questions, because this is really going to give me insight into what the author of the chapter thinks is important. And I want to know that. If they're going to tell me at the end what I should have learned from it, it's better to read that at the beginning and then have that in your mind as you go through the chapter. It's kind of like seeing a little preview to those important big points that they're going to get at. You're then going to go through and you can highlight all your headings or subheadings, or you may write them down on a separate piece of paper. They're going to come into play in the next step. And we want to make sure we're reviewing any pictures, graphics, diagrams, anything that's really kind of made special on the textbook page. So, the next step is to question. The Q stands for question. And what we're going to do here is we're going to take those headings and those subheadings that we've either highlighted or written down, and we're going to turn them into questions. Now, these don't have to be like super complex academic questions. It's more a matter of putting in a what is this, or what, like where, why, when, how. Think of your basic question format. And you're going to write these questions down either in your notes, or you could put them in the margins if that's more your style. But example on this textbook page here, if the heading was effects of neuronal activity on glial cells, I don't even know if I'm saying that right, I would turn that into what effects does neuronal activity have on glial cells, or what are the effects of neuronal activity on glial cells? The subheading that's kind of above that one, a cautionary note, I might change that to be, what should we be aware of, right? What am I being warned of here? What do I need to take precautions on? I'm going to just change it to a question. And so, like I said, you're going to write down these questions with space around them for you to fill in the answers, which you probably predicted we were going to get at when the next step is to read. So when we read under each of these headings or subheading sections, we're going to be looking for answers to those questions. So this is a pretty simple strategy in the sense that, we're rewording the title to be a question, and then we're going to read for an answer. But the perspective change that happens when you do this is huge, because now we're going to be reading with intent. We have a purpose behind what we're reading and what we're looking for, and that's going to change the reading experience. So now, instead of, starting at the first paragraph and reading through and not having any idea of what you just read, you're going to have a lot more of a connection to the material that you're reading through. You want to make sure you're making note of any vocabulary that's introduced. So these are things that are often put in bold print with definitions in the margins or things like that. But you can also write down any new or unfamiliar terms or words that you come across as well. And make sure you're looking these things up, right? If I come across an unfamiliar word in my textbook and I don't know what it means, it doesn't really do me any good to just continue reading on. I do want to kind of stop and make sure I look into that so I can get the context of what's being said, learn a little bit more about the terminology being used. And I want to make sure I'm rereading through any like pictures, diagrams, illustration, captions. So like I said before, they usually make a special deal of these things, and it's usually because they're important. There's either a visual representation of a concept or an important graph or visual that's going to help us understand the content. And make sure you're slowing down if the material is just too heavy or difficult to understand. Sometimes textbooks can be very convoluted. So what I mean by that is just full of information, and it's a little bit hard to distinguish what's important and what's not. So the key really is to slow down and make sure you're understanding things as you go. Doing it through this method of this question answer can really help with that, because when you have that intention, that purpose, you know what you're looking for, you'll know whether you found it or not once you read that paragraph. The next step is to respond. Oops, I'm missing my note there. Okay. So when I say respond, this can be something that you're just really doing mentally. You want to take the time to think about the content you have just read. Does it make sense? Is there anything that doesn't make sense that we need to now kind of look into a bit further? Think about it in the context of other things you've learned so far. And make sure when you're taking your notes, you're taking them in your own words. So I'm not just going to regurgitate the exact wording that the textbook uses, especially if that didn't really make sense to me. I want to make sure I can, find my answer from that paragraph, so my answer to my heading question, and answer it in a way that I would answer it. That's going to show that I actually understand the concept and that I can explain it. And you want to make note of anything that you don't really understand and need to investigate further. This can kind of become an ongoing list of things that you either want to make sure you bring up in class or discuss with a peer, or maybe I sign up for peer tutoring. I just won't want to make sure I'm sweeping these things under the rug, because then they come back to surprise us at exam time, and that's no fun. All right, and then review. If you've ever met with me before, you'll know that I'm very big on emphasizing the importance of reviewing your notes regularly throughout the term. So when you do the SQ4R reading strategy, you're essentially going to be creating a set of notes for your textbook chapters. So when your exam comes, it would be very unrealistic to say, okay, I'm going to reread all of my textbook chapters. That would take forever. Nobody has the time for that, and it also sounds very boring. So when we do the SQ4R method throughout the term, as each chapter reading is assigned, then we're going to come away at the end of the term with a set of study notes. And these are things that we should be reviewing throughout the term, but they're going to help us basically have more effective studying sessions near the end of the term. We want to make sure we're reviewing our notes before we go to class, because that's going to help us remember the content that's going to be taught, and we'll be able to make more connections that way. We also want to make sure we review these notes right after the class, because that way we can add any additional material, right? So if any of our questions or things that we were unsure about get answered, or if more examples or details are provided in class, we would just add them to those same set of study notes or reading notes that we have already taken. When we're looking at things in a question-answer format, that lends itself very well to making cue cards, which is a very classic studying strategy that people enjoy. So you can make your questions into cue cards, review them often, keep them on hand. If you pick up one of those little binder rings from the dollar store and hole punch the corner, it's a really neat way to keep them all together. And then the last step of the SQ4R method is to relate. So you want to make sure you're looking at your content in the lens of what does this connect to, right? I want to relate it to things that I already know. We want to make it connections to other content or material covered in class or in the textbook, as well as life experiences, right? That's going to help you solidify your understanding. It's going to help you see the application of the concept. How does this apply to the real world? How would I use this in the workforce? What are some real life examples? If you're a very visual person, you also might want to make mind maps to help you make those connections, especially when it comes to kind of making connections from other course material that you're studying and how these things all connect and relate and branch off from one another. So feel free to kind of use those visual and artistic skills to map that out and really think about your content in a way that isn't just a standalone chapter, but how does this fit in with the whole textbook, the whole course, everything that I'm learning here. And in conclusion, we also want to figure out, okay, if I'm going to use this strategy, how can I be realistic about it? I understand that if I were to say, you should apply this to every single chapter reading you do in your courses, you might be rolling your eyes and saying, there's absolutely no way I'm going to do that. And I get it. It would be a little bit more of a time commitment, especially if you're brand new to doing it. I would encourage you to try this at least for one of your classes. So make the commitment that for your textbook reading for one of your classes, maybe the one that's the most difficult textbook to read, try this strategy out on it. The benefits of doing it throughout the semester, as I said before, you're going to have ongoing study notes throughout the term that are ready for you come exam time. And you're also just going to be a little bit more prepared for your lecture when you do this prior to attending that week's class. But be realistic with it. Do what you can, even if you're only fitting in one of those R's, that's okay. But the whole method of surveying the chapter, turning those headings into questions, reading with intent, that's kind of the main part of this strategy that I would love for you to apply. I hope this helps. I wish you the best of luck with all your textbook reading, and let me know if you have any questions.